I want to welcome everybody to this wonderful session and entitled Shifting the Narrative, a health-focused approach to research with Indigenous women who are HIV positive. This webinar is hosted by Community-Based Research Canada. My name is Julia Coburn. I'm the CBR Canada Program Coordinator and the moderator for today's session. So first, I want to take a moment to respectfully acknowledge that CBR Canada is situated on lands that are deeply connected to Indigenous peoples who have historically lived and who currently live in this territory, including the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee Indigenous peoples. We recognize that these lands have always been a source of learning for Indigenous peoples. We also want to take a moment to acknowledge the death of George Floyd and all of the countless victims of racism. So a little bit about Community-Based Research Canada. Our mission is to advance community-based research excellence in Canada by strengthening partnerships, building capacity, mobilizing knowledge, and championing CBR among individuals, communities, and institutions. For 10 years, CBR Canada has brought together key players of community campus partnerships. Some CBR Canada founding members continue to be on the board today. We're thrilled to soon be sharing our new strategic plan with all members, and we look forward to continuing discussions with you to make the vision come to fruition. I want to point your attention, and I could see many of you have already seen it, on the bottom right-hand corner, there's a chat box. So please use that if you have questions or comments, and for our wonderful presenters today, and type it at any time. We'll be having a 15-minute Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So now I want to introduce our wonderful presenters today, Doris Peltier and Tracey Prentice. They are pros at this presentation, have done it over 100 times, as Doris has mentioned. So Doris works with the Canadian Aboriginal AIDS Network as the National Coordinator for Visioning Health 2, a 5-year intervention research study for HIV-positive Indigenous women in Canada. Doris also recently stepped into the role of Community Engagement Coordinator with the Feast Center for Indigenous SDBBI Research at McMaster University. Other current and select involvements include Community Advisory Council member with the Wakibenis Bryce Institute for Indigenous Health at the Dalai Lama School of Public Health, Women Living with HIV Advisory Group with World Health Organization, Aboriginal at Large Board of Director with the Canadian AIDS Treatment Information Exchange, and she recently joined the Board of Prisoners with HIV and AIDS Support Action Network. Doris has been involved for a decade in Indigenous community-based research, and is fluent in her Indigenous language, which frames her worldview and her approach to Indigenous research. I also want to welcome Tracey Prentice, and Tracey has been working for and with Indigenous communities nationally and internationally on community-led, culturally grounded, and policy-relevant research, ranging from HIV and SDBBI's mental health, cultural safety, and harm reduction for the past 15 years. Tracey has recently completed a CAIHR postdoctoral fellowship at the School of Public Health and Social Policy at the University of Victoria, where she co-led Visioning Health 2, an innovative strengths-based Indigenous health intervention project for HIV-positive Indigenous women. She has a PhD in population health from the University of Ottawa and an MA in cultural anthropology from Carleton University. Tracey is a settler Canadian born and raised in Northern Ontario, but she is grateful to live, work, and play in the unceded and unsurrendered Algonquin territory we call Ottawa. Tracey is currently the science advisor for the Canadian Institutes of Health Research Institute of Indigenous Peoples. And welcome, Doris and Tracey, and we're pleased to have you today.
Hello, Julia. Thank you. That was a great intro. And I'm going to begin the presentation today with the first few slides. And so we're going to tag team it like we usually do, right, Tracey?
That's right.
So I'm just going to pull up our first slide. Oops, let's go back. Whoop. I don't see our title slide, so we'll just skip that. Okay. So this is our presentation today, and there are a few things that we will be doing as part of our introduction as we start. So let's quickly go to the next slide. So I just want to acknowledge the land, the territory that I am at. I live in Montreal, Quebec. I am not from here, but this is where I currently reside. And I want to acknowledge the territory of the Haudenosaunee people where I'm situated right now. And as we often do when we do presentations, we will open with prayer. And I'm going to do that. I'll open with a short prayer just to bring that good energy into this presentation and to invite the ancestors to be with us as we present on this visioning health research study. And usually I do it in my Indigenous language. So, and I'm not going to change that today. I will do it in my Indigenous language. Ani bojo, em koenda gazet Indigenika swawash keshen do dem. Jemne dogo da goeche me goje wid bam shiang nungo. Manda wid bata mang manda kchigegon. Misko akazuin the god mwido at nibina the shnabe kwek kino man pi nike a king man pi Canada is nikadek. Kada goeche me goje wichi shiang janada mo shiang wewe na chigigi doang wewe na gegi no jibsin shake. Kada goeche me go mishkozi winge jimi shiang. Kada naka me go nongo jemne do mi goech kite go. Apajago kada spendagos mi goech jemne do mi goech. I also want to acknowledge the women that have that were part of our project that have gone on into the spirit world. Currently, what we know, we have lost 5 of the women from our research study, and I just want to acknowledge them. And more acknowledgements. I'm just going to quickly go through this slide and not necessarily speak to it. These are all the different groupings we have within our visioning health study. We do have the Women's Council that's guided this project from day one, from the whole call to submit a proposal. We want to do this and go national. And I also want to acknowledge our knowledge keepers. They are the ones that bring the cultural knowledge and traditions into the work that we do. And the community research coordinators are some of the women living with HIV. They stepped into these roles for all our sites, and I also acknowledge the community partners that we had across Canada and our broader research team, and I also want to acknowledge our funders. So why visioning health? I think this slide really speaks for itself. It is what, when I first became engaged in research as an HIV-positive Indigenous woman and as a newly diagnosed Indigenous woman, this is kind of the narrative that I saw in terms of some of the research that was being done about my peers, about Indigenous women living with HIV. And so this is really a deficit approach in terms of presenting the lives and speaking to the lives of Indigenous women living with HIV. And this was the narrative that was out there, which did not sit comfortably with me in terms of seeing these words and being identified in this way. So I call this a stock narrative, or the deficit narrative, or I also call it a dangerous story. So it needed to shift, and that is why we started doing visioning health.
So I think,
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. So I think I'm up for the next couple of slides. So as Doris mentioned, we typically tag team these presentations. So why visioning health, and why visioning health the way visioning health is? When we started to develop the visioning health project, and we're going to tell you a little bit more about the background and how it came to be in a little bit. But this was sort of our touchstone. This was kind of a guiding principle for us, and remains a guiding principle for visioning health today. And that's just the way that we do research is just as important, if not more so, than the outcomes or the knowledge that is gained about a particular health issue. And so when we were developing Visioning Health 1, we're now in Visioning Health 2, this really guided our thinking. And so every time there's a significant decision to be made, or we're thinking about, what do we do next, we come back to this principle, that the way that we do the research, the processes that we engage in, and the way that we engage in them are critical to not only to our outcomes, but to Indigenous health in general. And sorry, and so Visioning Health 2, as I say, we're talking about Visioning Health 2 today, but Visioning Health 2 really emerged from Visioning Health 1 pilot study that Doris and I developed and implemented together almost 10 years ago now. And so that was a small study of 13 HIV-positive Indigenous women in 3 cities across Canada, Toronto, Montreal, and, two cities, Toronto, Montreal, and then there was a virtual group comprised of women from across the country. And really, our goal in that particular study was largely descriptive. So really, what we wanted to know was, what does health mean? If you're an HIV-positive Indigenous woman, what does health mean to you? What does that look like? And what is the role of culture and gender in either creating or maintaining or supporting your health? And so we designed an entire study around that, coming back to that principle of the way that we do research. And one of the most significant findings that has guided our research since is that what we discovered, aside from the findings around health, culture, and gender, what we discovered that the women told us was that participating in visioning health, that when we attend to the things here on the slide, so meaningful engagement of Indigenous women, when we attend to the strengths and the assets of women, when we ground ourselves in Indigenous knowledge and cultural traditions and ceremony, and when we create a safe place, co-create a safe place or a safe space for women to be in and to explore these things for themselves, that the research itself, the process of doing and engaging in the research, can be healing for the women. And so following that study, they asked us to develop a larger study, a national study. What they said to us was, my peers, my sisters need to be able to experience this. And so can we do a larger study, something that is national in scope, and that has greater emphasis, that engages the women even more than we currently did in Visioning Health 1? And can we also, can we evaluate that? Can we include quantitative tools? So can we include an evaluation and assessment of the process itself? Because Visioning Health 1 didn't have that. Visioning Health 1 was a descriptive study. And so they asked us to develop the second study, Visioning Health 2, that would specifically assess and evaluate the model of visioning health using both qualitative and quantitative tools. And so this is what Visioning Health 2 looks like. Visioning Health 2 is what we call a nested research project. So it's a study within a study, and it really had two goals. One, again, was to build on that descriptive data set, to co-create new knowledge about the meaning of health and how it intersects with culture and gender for roughly 70 to 90, we thought, HIV-positive Indigenous women across Canada. That was our first goal. And our second goal was to develop and assess the visioning health model as a health intervention for Indigenous women living with HIV. And this is really what we're here to talk about today, is this second goal. And I said that the women asked us to specifically have greater emphasis on the meaningful engagement of Indigenous women. And so we developed a number of different leadership roles for Indigenous women living with HIV in our research project. To start with, many of the women that were part of the Visioning Health 1 research project were key players in developing the research proposal itself, in developing the research questions, in developing our research design. So there are a number of HIV-positive Indigenous women on our research team. We also, Doris has already referred to this, we also developed a women's council, again, that was comprised of all of the women from Visioning Health 1, to really help guide both of the transition from Visioning Health 1 to Visioning Health 2, but also to guide us over the length and the duration of the research project. We also developed a CRC position, or a CRA position, so a community research coordinator position, that was to be held by HIV-positive Indigenous women, with preference given to the women of Visioning Health 1. So with preference given to women who had already been through the process, to continue to invest in them and to support them in developing their research skills, developing other kinds of skills that are sort of related to research. And we also developed a peer mentor role. And so this is recognizing that not all women have the same goals, and not all women have the same skill set, and aren't interested in developing this skill set. And so while some women were interested in taking on the responsibility of a community research coordinator, others were maybe more interested in just a peer mentor role. So for us, the difference there is a peer mentor. We're really there just to sort of share their own experience of being an HIV-positive woman and what that meant, what that looked like in the world, but also their own experience of participating in Visioning Health. And so again, it was a little bit of a sort of a transition role, I guess, in each of the regions, which I'll get to in a moment. And then, of course, I've already referred to the mixed methods. And so Visioning Health 1 was a purely qualitative research study. Visioning Health 2 is a mixed method. So we retain all of the qualitative methods and the focus on storytelling and on understanding and honoring the stories that the women tell about their health, and about the ways that culture and gender support them. But we also built in a series of scales, which I'll get to, and we'll talk about a little bit more in shortly, that we call a VH2 wellness questionnaire. And so we also built that into our model. Just going to go to my next slide. And so this is what the study design looks like. And so Visioning Health, as I said, it's a nested research study. So it's a study within a study, but really it's 8 studies within a study. And so the Visioning Health process, or the model, is designed as a group research process. So this is something that a group of HIV-positive Indigenous women go through together. It's not one-on-one interviews. It's a group research process where they all come together to learn from each other, to support each other, to be with each other. Visioning Health 2 and Visioning Health 1 is grounded in culture, and there's a number of ways that we do that. And so we use Indigenous research methods, and so Indigenous methodologies, such as sharing circles and storytelling, just as an example. But I think more importantly, we engage with knowledge keepers across the board. And so we have a series of we have a national team that has 2 Indigenous knowledge carriers on it. And again, they were members of Visioning Health 1. And so they have really helped develop our research protocol. They keep us grounded in Indigenous knowledge, keep us grounded in Indigenous ceremony and Indigenous culture. And we make sure that all of that is carried over into our 8 sites. We are a strength-based project, and so we really focus on helping women understand and discover their own strengths and their own assets. We use the arts to help us, to help the women tell their stories. We focus on women, and that's women broadly defined. And so there are a number of trans women, gender non-binary women in our study, but we really focus on what it means for the women to be a woman. And we are community-based participatory research study, and so we're also very focused on action and on bringing the community into every step of the research process. There are 8 sites across Canada. So Visioning Health 2. If you look at the image, just I guess what is that to the left of your screen? I suppose the left of the slide. This is sort of an excerpt from our governance model. So in the middle, we have the VH2 itself. Surrounded that are regional sites, which are the nested. So here there's 7, but we actually have 8 sites across Canada that all use the same Visioning Health model, and together all of that information comes together to create Visioning Health 2. And then there's sort of the working group around that is the next level, I suppose. So that would be people like myself and Doris and Charlotte Lopi, who's the nominated principal investigator, and Renee Mastering from CAN, who's a knowledge user, and our 2 knowledge keepers would be there. And then there's the Women's Council, which we've already talked about. So these are positive women who also help guide our project. And then there's the research team that also helps guide our project in a different way. And so that's sort of the overall governance structure. But more importantly, I think it was really important for us that each of the 8 sites have their own team. And so each of the 8 sites has a community research coordinator, which is an HIV-positive Indigenous woman. They have a local knowledge carrier that works very closely with the community research coordinator, and very often is chosen by the community research coordinator as somebody that they can work with and work well with together. We have a local community partner, and so this is somebody ideally, and often this is somebody who has a relationship with Indigenous, positive Indigenous women, and provides services to the positive Indigenous women in that region. And where possible, we also have a local researcher. And so the reason that we did this is because we knew that Visioning Health 2 would come to an end one day, and we really wanted to help support local capacity and to build that local support for women, knowing very well that there's only so much that at a national level, Doris and I and others on the research team could do to support people locally on the ground. So it was really important to us that we had those local teams. There are 2 engagement styles that Doris will be telling you about a little bit later. There's a retreat and extended engagement. And then I've already spoken about the assessment and evaluation that we will also talk about a little bit more, and culture as intervention. And so what we came to discover about ourselves, if you will, is that culture became the intervention. The more we engaged with the women, the more we realized that culture itself was healing, and that the women wanted more culture in the intervention, and so that developed along the way. This is what an actual Visioning Health model looks like. Doris, did you want to say something?
Oh, is this the slide? Am I going to be sharing the models?
You can if you'd like, sure.
Okay, so this is what the Visioning Health 2 model looks like. So there's an orientation process at the beginning, and we also they also do the wellness questionnaire, which is it says T1, so that means time 1. So this wellness questionnaire is actually done 3 times, twice during the intervention. And then we have a sharing circle asking the questions about health looks like for the women, and how culture supports their health, and what health looks like through a gender lens. And there's also an art making process. We introduced that, and we've had a variety of art making projects that happen, like hand drums, birch bark baskets, regalia dolls, and you could see the lists there. And more recently, we also, one group of women made the Métis blanket coat, which is called the capote, and that was quite amazing. So we even had a fashion show after that. And then we have a second sharing circle where they tell us about the meaning of their art, where we ask them, uh, you know, what did you make and why did you make it the way you made it? So we ask about the meaning of the artwork, and in that second sharing circle, and then they, from that sharing circle, they write their own narrative about their art pieces that they worked on. And then the second time, the wellness questionnaire, they take part in that. And then we have another sharing circle, which really is about evaluation. And then on the last day, there's usually a celebration that takes place where they have an art exhibit, and they can invite who they would like to share their experience with and their artwork. We have an art exhibit, and we eat together. We have a feast. And 3 months down the road, we do the questionnaire again for the third time. And so leading up to actually doing the intervention, we had to do trainings of our teams. So we had 2 large training sessions where we brought together 3 teams. In twice we did that, and we brought together 3 teams. In one in BC in the interior, and the other one took place in Manitoba for the Prairies team. And so we trained for 5 days. We did the training for all the community research coordinators. And these are some of the pictures from our training. I really like that one picture of the team that's being trained out riding in golf carts. That's actually, we're on our way to do some medicine picking and to learn about the local medicines that were on the ground there. I also like that photo of the 2 women with the drumsticks, and they're holding them up together. One woman is teaching her peer a drum song, and behind them are researchers that are kind of. I really like what this picture says, because the researchers are in the background while the women are standing in the foreground, and that suggests the model, how we do the research in terms of meaningful engagement. So here's our 2 styles. We had one is a retreat style. It's 5-day retreat, and usually on the land, outside of urban environments. But it's shifted a little bit too, as we kind of met the needs of the local community. So in Thunder Bay, they made art boxes, which are repurposed. They were cigar boxes, and there was a homecoming ceremony. For the BC site, they made birch bark baskets, and you could see a picture of one of them in the visuals there. And in Saskatchewan North, they made talking sticks. You also see a visual there, and the art boxes in the bottom corner as well. And in Alberta, they, like I said earlier, they made capotes and hand drums as well. And that finished with a fashion show, because look at that beautiful capote and the drum that's in the visual there. And so in the retreat style, the women, after the intervention, one woman said, "I feel stronger and I feel ready for what I have to face at home." So that's a quote from one of the women. And the second model I want to share with you is the extended engagement. And this is a more of an extended engagement. It's a 9-week period of time that that the women meet on a weekly basis, and it's an urban kind of model, and so they don't have to leave home. They're doing the intervention right in their home territory, in their urban center. So they go home every evening. And in Regina, they made medicine bundles, and they participated in sweat lodge ceremonies where they received their spirit names and their colors. And in Toronto, they made regalia dolls, and they also received their spirit names. And they received a teaching on the jingle dress. You could see the jingle dress dancer in the visual there. And one woman said, the best thing that could have happened to me is when you came forward and asked me if I'd be interested. It got me off the drugs. The other style was a mixed model style. So it was mixed with the retreat and the extended engagement. So so it's a combination of both models. In Winnipeg, they went out of the city and did a 1.5 day orientation in a retreat setting to begin their extended engagement. And they learned about medicines there. They made medicine bundles. They also had sweat lodge ceremony, and they received their spirit names. And in Montreal, we called it an urban retreat. And it was also about not taking women out of their familiar spaces, because some women don't want to leave their familiar spaces. And so we felt for this site that they could go home every night, and but we still go out during the day to the nearby reserve here outside of Montreal. And so it was they had water ceremony teaching there. We even went to bingo one night, all of us, which was something new. And country food is the term that Inuit women will use for traditional foods. So there was seal meat that was available for them. At the end of our intervention, country food was brought in, and throat singers came to honor the women that had completed the 5-day intervention. And one woman said, I never in a million years thought I would make a drum again. I didn't think I'd get connected back into the sweat lodge. And so, and I should also note, in Montreal, we had primarily Inuit women in our intervention.
So this is me again. Thank you, Doris.
Okay.
And so very quickly, so across 8 sites, we had 67 women who participated, and you can see just sort of a rough sketch of how those women identified there. And I think so. For the next few slides, we're really going to talk about the VH2 Wellness Questionnaire. And again, this was the second goal of the Visioning Health 2 project, was to evaluate and assess the Visioning Health model as a health intervention for HIV-positive Indigenous women. And the way that we did that is we worked with the women themselves from the Visioning Health 1 project, and also other team members to develop that questionnaire. So if we were going to do this, what would we want to know, right? And so we went back to the findings of Visioning Health 1, and we thought that connectedness was one of the outcomes that the women felt was important coming out of Visioning Health 1. The degree to which participating in Visioning Health 1 helped them feel connected at a variety of different levels. Self-determination or self-mastery was also important. So the degree to which over the course of their time with us in Visioning Health 1, their sense of being able to cope with life's challenges improved or not over that duration, and social support. And so did the support that they either have or feel like they have, did that increase over the course of Visioning Health? And so we brought together a couple of different tools that had either been developed or adapted to Indigenous worldviews. And so those are a connectedness scale, a self-determination or self-mastery scale, and a social support scale. And we put all of these together into what we called a visioning health to wellness questionnaire that, as Doris pointed out, we asked the women to complete 3 times, once at the very beginning before we even started, once at the end of the visioning health intervention, and then 3 months later to see if any change that we might have been able to detect could we still detect it 3 months later. So was it lasting change? That's what we were looking for. And what we found actually is that yes, we could. And so in terms of overall connectedness, you can see the different kinds of scales. So we asked women, we designed some questions around connectedness to self, connectedness to peers, to family, to the HIV community, the home community, connection to culture, to creator, and to the land. And what we found that over the period of time, that yes, these connections were strengthened. They did increase over the period of time that they're with us in Visioning Health. And interestingly enough, that positive change, maintained 3 months post Visioning Health intervention. And so you could see the figures, I suppose, that are in red. If it's in red, it indicates statistical significance. And so in terms of overall connectedness, 3 months between time 1 and time 3, the overall connectedness was statistically significant, as was the connection to self, the connection to peers, to the home community, culture, creator, and the land. And so all of that is very encouraging for 2 reasons. One, because it shows us in sort of a concrete way, it shows us that Visioning Health does work to increase a women's sense of connection. And that in most cases, that is a lasting change. So that was really, really encouraging for us. Here's just some of the things. So combining the qualitative and the quantitative, here's some of the things that women said about different levels or different kinds of connection. So in terms of connection to self, I feel more peace with myself and hopeful for the future. In terms of peers, I thought I was the only one, but now I know that I'm not alone. And in terms of culture, that it's changed me, that I look at my culture and I look at myself as an Indigenous woman differently. And so again, all of that is very, very encouraging for us. Same in terms of self-determination, the overall self-determination findings, I suppose, were statistically significant between time 1 and time 2. So over the duration of the Visioning Health intervention. Time 3 was not statistically significant, but you can see that it's still very close. And there's a whole other narrative that is equally interesting around why we think it is not statistically significant. And it will come to that a little bit later when we talk about challenges. And also in terms of peers and in terms of connection to the HIV community, that change also was maintained over time. And here's a quote from one of the women that said that, it just makes me feel alive. It makes me feel like I could do anything else. Now that I've completed Visioning Health, that I'm in a better place moving forward. Same with social support. So again, between time 1 and time 2, and also 3 months follow-up, there was an increase in a sense of social support. So the support that women felt they had and could rely on in terms of emotional and informational support, there was a change that maintained. In terms of tangible support, by tangible support we meant things like what did we mean by tangible support? Things like housing support, right? Somebody I could go to if I had challenges with housing or with finances. So that kind of support. For the duration of the project, when women were engaged with their local community partners, they felt like they were more connected. There was an increase in support, but that did not maintain over time. And again, there's an entirely different narrative that we might touch on briefly. And then again, in terms of a change over time, again, this is one of the women saying that, I realized now that I'm not the only one out there, and that participating in Visioning Health has really helped me open up and share my experiences with other women. And so all of that is very, very positive for us. And over to you, Doris.
And in terms of the evaluation, as you can see, it was overwhelmingly positive. Best thing to happen to me, and good medicine, and a desire that for it to not end. And I wish there were more programs like this. And it's funny that they've always called Visioning Health a program, even with Visioning Health 1. And it's interesting that it carried over into Visioning Health 2. I think that was part of the design, because it didn't feel like research, it felt like a program. And it still felt like a program in Visioning Health 2, even though we introduced those quantitative tools into the mix. And one woman said, I feel stronger and I feel ready for what I have to face at home. So good evaluation from the women. They didn't want it to end. And do you remember that first slide you saw with all the deficit words in it, the pathogenic model? Well, this is when you pay attention to the way you do research with HIV-positive Indigenous women, this is the language that emerges. It's very strengths-based. These are their own words, and it's really important to highlight this. And sometimes we bookend the other slide that you saw at the beginning of the presentation with this one, because it kind of shows the change that happens when attention is given to the space that is created when you do the research. And it is a co-created space because they make their own protocols on how everyone's going to be in that space. And these are just some of the outcomes that we achieved. There's a national network now of positive Indigenous women across Canada. And we hope that we will connect them we were hoping to connect them all this August, but COVID-19 happened. We were going to connect them at a health symposium, which would bring up to 300 women to the health symposium. And we also accomplished, surprisingly, this big cadre of knowledge carriers from across the country. And this was unanticipated because they played a key role in all the sites, and they employed harm reduction in their work, and they embraced harm reduction, and they were very diverse group. They were a very diverse group of knowledge carriers, and in some instances, you can refer to them as the elders. And in most cases, women are connected locally following our study. And there's this other piece too that became kind of important for some of the women. They saw it as a stepping stone to other work and jobs within research. So that was important. Is this your slide?
In terms of yes, yeah. And so in terms of the challenges, there were a couple of sort of operational challenges. No research is perfect, of course, and people aren't perfect. So there were a couple of sort of operational challenges in terms of meeting space and the length of time of the meetings, and proper compensation for CRCs and peer mentors. There was a bigger challenge with ongoing engagement, but I'm actually going to save that just for questions in case we want to have a larger discussion around that. But just to say that, once Visioning Health was done, there were limited opportunities for women to engage to the level or to the degree that they were now used to engaging, and that created its own challenges. In terms of, I want to just go to the next slide. And so what have we learned to date? And I know we're bumping up against our time, but I just want to go through this really quickly. And so our big learning to date is that when we create opportunities for women to come together in meaningful ways, in ways that are safe, in ways that celebrate their strengths, their gifts, in ceremony, that transformation occurs. All of the women envisioning Health 2 have been changed by the process of engaging with other women in very positive ways. And that, that the other thing that we learned is that VH is actually doing what we had hoped it would do, which is a pleasant finding. I mean, we always hope that when we do research, but it doesn't always turn out that way. And so we have found, both through qualitative and quantitative, that women do, over the course of visioning health, they do come to feel stronger, and they come to feel more connected on multiple levels. They feel less alone. They feel like they have more support, and all of that leads to a greater sense of self-mastery, of self-determination in ways that spill over into their lives in more general ways, and that they're just more equipped and to meet life's challenges. And I just want to, again, I know we're bumping up against our time limit, but I really want to play this video for you. So this is Krista Shore. Krista was one of the Visioning Health 1 co-researchers that then stepped into a community research coordinator role and ran her own Visioning Health 2 group in Regina. And so this is what she has to say about Visioning Health 2 and about what they hoped to achieve in their group in Regina, and from her perspective, what they did achieve. It's a 3-minute video, but I think it's worth it. So let's hear Krista.
My name is Krista Shore, TT Pinesi Square, Rolling Thunder Woman. I am the peer research assistant for the Regina, Saskatchewan site with Visioning Health 2. As HIV-positive women, and to take on different teachings over the past 9 weeks that really help us to reconnect and to build ourselves up, in good ways, and being able to utilize, those teachings in good ways to help us, live good life, mio pamazzo, and to live a good life here. Throughout the time together, women have had the chance and ability to learn about, like I said, the 4 sacred medicines, and to reconnect with that and be able to utilize that in a good way for their day-to-day life, with coping and living with HIV. In a Western world context, we take antiretrovirals, which helps us to sustain life and to get the HIV under control, to be undetectable, so that we don't transmit the virus to anybody, and we keep ourselves healthy and well. So in our way, in our cultural way, we have our 4 sacred medicines, which were gifted to the people for reasons. So we went through many different things, like vision boards. We had reflected on the stories that our women carry, and we did it in a strength-based approach, really having the women reflect on where they're at today and visioning forward. Journeying with HIV is not a death sentence, and does not have to be a death sentence in Canada today. We have such a wealth of tools and knowledge in a medical, biomedical realm, as well as many tools on the ground. Most phenomenal thing I've had the experience of is hearing all the women laugh together. There's been times that we've cried together, and we've cried together, because we're all alike in ways. We lifted each other up, but when these women laugh together, that is like music. That is like an orchestra, and it's beautiful. And the women are asking, what's next? What's next? So what did we do on the ground? We really gave back to the women. We gave them a space. We gave them a place to open up and to just be and to heal. We are gonna present, the sweat lodge to them. They're gonna bring in family members, and support people are gonna be in there, which makes it even more meaningful and just powerful for the women. We're gonna have songs, medicine. There'll be the pipe. The pipe will be over there, visiting at the site. We have built a capacity on the ground. We have built a momentum on the ground in our community. And that's exactly what we wanted to do. And we wanted to see here in Saskatchewan at the Regina site.
Beautiful. Over to you, Doris.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Every time I see that video, I'm just totally touched. And we want to finish with this slide before we say thank you. This is a quote from one of the women after we did a ceremony where it's called the coming home ceremony, and we did this ceremony to welcome the women back to their community by community. And in ceremony with cedar, using cedar brushing and cedar water, we welcome them back into the community. And that ceremony is done for Indigenous people that are been disenfranchised from their communities and disconnected from their communities and their families. And so it's a powerful ceremony. And this one woman went up to Tracey after we did the ceremony, and she asked, "Do I look taller?" She answered it herself, "I feel taller." So for me, this captures the spirit of visioning health, and I just want to honor that woman as well for this. And we're done our presentation, and we have a little bit of time for questions.
Wow, thank you so much, Doris and Tracey, for taking us on this amazing journey with you, just summarizing the incredible work with Visioning Health 1 and 2. It just shows the power of community-based research and just looking at what can be done when the research goes beyond just focusing on what the actual research experience and what came out of that. It was extremely powerful. Also, to end with Krista and her own words. I wonder if anybody has any questions for Doris and Tracey. Please type them into the chat box on the right-hand side. Also, I wanted to mention that this webinar, thankfully I was able to record it. I'm going to put it in the chat box here. So with the recording, you can find in this URL. I'll have it up in early next week. If I'm going to get started with our questions, and we have just a couple minutes, but again, please share your questions if you have them. I'm actually curious. Oh, we actually have one here. So from Nikki. So hi, Doris and Tracey. Such a wonderful presentation and so interesting to hear about this work in such detail. I was wondering about the issue of family that was consistently not significant. Can you explain a bit more about this?
Maybe I can answer that, Tracey. Sure. So that actually came up when we were developing the tools, because I spoke earlier about that coming home ceremony and that kind of disconnection that happens sometimes for many reasons. It could be 60 scoop, no connection to your home community, and that disconnection piece. So I think that had a huge impact on some of the women when they had a hard time. They were triggered. Some of them were triggered to look at that piece, because quite often what happens with families when you're diagnosed with HIV is sometimes you're pushed away by your own family, or sometimes you don't have that family as well. So that's the Indigenous women's, that's the real life issues that we work with in research.
Yeah, that was a interesting observation. Obviously, you could see a lot of the indicators going up, and then there were a couple that was an interesting observation, Nikki. I can see some others are having questions. Maybe you have time for one or two. This work has created a new chosen family. That's really beautiful.
Exactly.
I wonder, maybe if you can speak to what the future of visioning health is and where you like to see this go next, or maybe the kind of approach to this work and the future of that.
Sure. Doris, you want to start?
Sure. So the future, the women are going to tell us when we bring them all together at our health symposium, which has been delayed. That health symposium won't happen till 2021. So they're going to tell us where they would like to go with this. There also has been some discussion and about establishing a Visioning Health Foundation. And so that's something that we need to push towards as well. Tracey?
Yeah, exactly so. And so there have been a couple of things that have been discussed already. As Doris says, we did receive some money to bring women together, all of the women of Visioning Health, and all of the knowledge carers and all of the community partners together at a national women's gathering that we're hoping will happen next. It was supposed to happen this summer, but probably next summer. And part of the conditions of the funding for that was to talk about what's next and to ask the women themselves, are we done now? Have you seen enough? Have you done enough? Or do you want what do you want more, and what might that look like? And so that's one thing that we're thinking about. A number of the community partners have also independently applied for funding to either continue or adapt Visioning Health in their own communities. And so there are a couple of the regions that have already received funding to continue Visioning Health. And there are others that are actively seeking funds. We have had conversations with some of our community partners and the women in particular regions to think about, well, maybe we need a provincial network, a provincial Visioning Health network, or something of that nature. So there are a couple of things that there's a couple of sort of balls in the air, so to speak. But Doris's original point that we're waiting for the direction from the women still stands. It's really whatever the women want.
I think yeah. Oh, go ahead, Doris.
I also think that when we're going to put out the Visioning Health model as the Visioning Health program. It's no longer going to be a model. It's been tested. So that Visioning Health program will be available on our website. We're working on our website right now. And that also kind of invites, tools for the women to do Visioning Health in their own communities. So we're also looking at creating some of those knowledge tools that can, that we can give to the women, and they can talk about Visioning Health in their own regions and do a Visioning Health program in their region.
That would be incredible, and please keep us in the loop so we can, if that's a resource that you'd like to share outwardly, because there were so many tools and so much thought went into this. It's really an incredible example of community-based research done well and very thoughtfully well done and led by the women themselves, and continues to go forward that way from beginning to end. So it's really beautiful. I'm going to maybe I can see one more question I just want to leave with before we wrap up. So Liz has asked, for researchers, it is powerful to see such meaningful meaning for community, powerful meaning to see being involved with the research, bringing such strengths but powerful research methodology. What are some of the key elements of bringing together the cultures of researchers and those with lived experience you can tell us about?
Great question. Was it Liz? Fantastic question. So maybe I'll just start on this, Doris. I know we've had a very short period of time, but I mean, key elements. It sounds super simple, but it's a key element is mutual respect and communication. And so we were very clear from the beginning of developing this project that we wanted to be grounded in culture, grounded in ceremony, and that meant being guided by knowledge carriers. And so we had knowledge carriers on our team right from the very beginning, and helped to develop the research protocols, the research questions, the container, so to speak, of the women. And it's a constant process of check and balances, almost, right? And so one of the things that we like to say is that in envisioning health, we created research that responded to the needs of women, rather than research that responded to the needs of the research, right? And so we always put the needs of community first, and we made the research fit that context. And the knowledge carriers and the inclusion of culture was part of that ongoing negotiation process. It has not been seamless. There are a number of elements that have been challenging and should have been challenging and will continue to be challenging moving forward. These are two disparate worlds. And so bringing them together has really, in a meaningful way, has really involved an ongoing process of conversation. What does it mean to be in ceremony when you're also doing research? And the needs of the research are that you need to record this conversation. Well, how does that work, right? And so it really was a process of just ongoing mutual respect, trying to understand, okay, what are our needs? What are your needs? How can these two things come together? And just to overtly recognizing that we all sit at the same table, we all sit in a circle, and none of our needs and none of our positions are higher or lower than the other. All of our needs are equal. And so, Doris, did you want to say anything else more about
that? No, thank you. I actually have another meeting that I have to be at, so thank you very much, everybody.
That's okay. Yeah, thank you so much, Doris and Tracey. Just a wonderful presentation and knowledge, and we'll happy to share this with everybody in the end. And hopefully, we can keep this conversation going. It's a really important work that you've shared with us. There's some more ways to get involved, including webinars such as this, and in the future. And we'd love to have continue conversations like this on these types of topics and many other topics in community-based research. And at the end, take a minute to share your feedback. And again, thank you so much, everybody. And